They tell you to be good, to be patient, to forgive. They say virtue will protect you, that if you do what's right, life will reward you. But the truth, the one Seneca whispered from the heart of a decaying empire, is far darker. Good men suffer not because they are weak, but because the world no longer recognizes goodness when it sees it. A man who stands by principle becomes a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable. His honesty reveals corruption. His restraint exposes indulgence. His integrity reminds others of their own decay. And so, the good man becomes the target. Mocked for being too quiet, too rigid, too moral. Punished for not playing the game everyone else has surrendered to. He learns that virtue, in an age of deceit, is not protection, it is provocation. Seneca lived in Rome, a world collapsing under luxury, ambition, and deceit, yet he dared to ask, what is the cost of being good in a world that rewards the opposite? He was praised by emperors and hunted by them too. He taught wisdom to power, only to be destroyed by the very hand he tried to guide. 2,000 years later, his question remains the same. If goodness demands your peace, your freedom, even your life, was it ever goodness, or just another form of sacrifice? Seneca was born into a world drowning in excess. Rome, the heart of civilization, was rotting from within, senators trading loyalty for favor, soldiers killing for ambition, and citizens losing themselves in the endless chase for pleasure. And in the midst of it all stood Lucius Annaeus Seneca, philosopher, statesman, and reluctant advisor to an emperor who would one day order his death. He wasn't a priest of morals. He wasn't preaching purity from a distance. He lived in the belly of corruption, surrounded by power, privilege, and poison, and yet he dared to believe that a man could still remain untouched. Seneca's philosophy was simple, but merciless. Virtue is the only good. Everything else, wealth, status, pleasure, even survival, is secondary. To live with integrity is to live in harmony with nature, guided by reason, untouched by the madness of the crowd. But that is precisely what made his life unbearable. Because when you live by reason in a world ruled by emotion, you don't just stand apart, you become a threat. Seneca understood something that still disturbs us today. The truly good man doesn't belong anywhere. He sees too clearly to be deceived, feels too deeply to be indifferent, and refuses too stubbornly to play by the rules of corruption. He becomes an exile within his own time. In Rome, men of reason were admired in public but feared in private. Their presence was a quiet accusation, a living reminder that moral decay is a choice, not a fate. And for that, they were isolated. This is the hidden paradox of virtue, it demands solitude. When you see the truth too clearly, you lose the comfort of belonging. When you refuse to bend, you break the illusion of unity. Seneca himself lived this paradox until the end. He was appointed as a tutor to Nero, a young emperor full of promise. For years, Seneca tried to mold him into a philosopher king, a ruler guided by reason rather than ego. But the seed of madness had already taken root. As Nero's power grew, so did his paranoia. And when the court turned against Seneca, accusing him of conspiracy, Nero ordered him to take his own life, the final act of irony in a life devoted to virtue. Seneca's death was not a failure. It was his philosophy made flesh. He met death calmly, with no hatred, no fear, only acceptance. He wrote that life and death are not to be measured by years, but by integrity. And in that moment, he proved what he had always taught. The good man cannot control the world, only his response to it. But here lies the cost, the one Seneca never hid. To live with integrity in a world that thrives on compromise means you will lose the things others live for. You will be misunderstood, envied, betrayed, and forgotten. Because the good man's value is invisible to those still chasing illusions. And yet, Seneca believed it was worth it. Because the alternative, living as a slave to fear, desire, and deceit, is far worse. Virtue, to him, was not about appearing moral. It was about achieving inner freedom, the kind no tyrant can touch, no crowd can give, and no failure can destroy. He wrote, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." In other words, the suffering of the good man is not punishment, it is proof. The cost of being good is high, but it is the only cost that makes a man free. Seneca's world has long turned to dust, but the system remains the same. Goodness still walks the earth wearing a target on its back. And those who refuse to compromise, who live by truth instead of convenience, still find themselves alone, doubted, and quietly punished by the very society they try to uplift. Because goodness, in its purest form, exposes the sickness of the world. And the world will always destroy what reminds it of its sickness. Imagine being a man who still believes in decency, who keeps his word, refuses to manipulate, and treats others with fairness even when there's no reward for it. In the modern world, that man is often dismissed as naive, too good, or simply unfit for the game. We live in an age that celebrates performance over principle, optics over truth, and pleasure over purpose. And that's exactly where Seneca's ghost still speaks, whispering that virtue has not died, it has only become more expensive. The hidden cost of being a good man today is not paid in coins or blood, but in quiet isolation. The man who lives by principles soon realizes how few people actually want principled men around them. Integrity makes others uncomfortable. It exposes the shortcuts they take, the lies they justify, the weakness they disguise as sophistication. Seneca would tell you that's because people do not hate virtue, they hate what it reflects back at them. In Rome, it was Nero who could not stand the calm presence of a man who would not flatter him. Today, it's the boss who dislikes the employee who refuses to gossip, the friend group that quietly edges out the one who doesn't join in their hypocrisy, or the woman who loses interest when she realizes the good man's strength lies in restraint, not manipulation. This is the tragedy of modern virtue, it's rarely rewarded, yet always tested. The modern good man finds himself torn between authenticity and acceptance. He's told to be himself, yet punished the moment his integrity threatens someone's comfort. Seneca's wisdom becomes a weapon against this confusion. He said, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." In today's language, to seek everyone's approval is to lose your own identity. The modern world feeds on distraction and validation, both of which corrode the soul. The good man who refuses to sell himself to these forces appears out of place, even invisible. Yet invisibility is his quiet triumph. Because to remain unseen but uncorrupted is to retain power in a world that constantly tries to buy your soul in small pieces. The same applies to relationships. Modern culture tells men that goodness is weakness, that to be kind, empathetic, or emotionally grounded is to be uninteresting. But that's only because many people have mistaken chaos for depth, and trauma for passion. The good man, grounded in stoic calm, unnerves those addicted to volatility. His steadiness feels alien in a world built on emotional noise. Seneca's ideal man, tranquil amid storms, doesn't chase affection, he embodies value. But that very peace makes him frightening to those who feed on drama. It's not that intelligent, moral, or self-disciplined men can't find love, it's that their very presence forces others to confront their own instability. In this sense, goodness becomes an existential mirror. Most would rather shatter it than look too closely. In society, too, the Stoic man is an anomaly. The system rewards obedience disguised as ambition. It glorifies burnout, consumerism, and social climbing, all built on the illusion that meaning comes from accumulation. But the man who follows Seneca's teachings knows that everything external is fleeting. He invests in his character, not his image. He seeks mastery, not applause. And that's precisely why the world cannot fully tolerate him. He is unbuyable. A man who cannot be seduced by wealth, shamed by failure, or manipulated by fear is dangerous to any corrupt order. He stands outside the economy of illusion. He cannot be sold hope because he already understands contentment. He cannot be controlled through desire because he has mastered his appetites. The modern good man, like Seneca, is not powerless, he's untamed. And that makes him a silent rebel in a civilization built on compliance. Yet here's where the lesson grows darker. The more you align with virtue, the lonelier your road becomes. Society loves the idea of goodness but hates its embodiment. The crowd worships moral heroes only after they're dead, when their example no longer challenges the living. Socrates was executed, Jesus was crucified, Seneca was forced to his death. The world celebrates the moral man only when he's safely buried. Today, the burial is social, not physical. You're exiled digitally, cancelled, dismissed, labeled, rigid, or toxic, simply because your principles disrupt the narrative. But Seneca would say, good. Let the world do what it does. Its judgment cannot touch your soul unless you invite it in. The cost of being a good man is heavy, but the alternative is unbearable. If you abandon your values to fit in, you become a shell, full of applause but empty of peace. The Stoic path offers no comfort, only clarity, that suffering for truth is the only form of pain that purifies. Modern life tries to convince men that they can buy their way into fulfillment, through status, pleasure, or validation. But Seneca's writings dismantle that lie. He reminds us that happiness built on externals is fragile. It collapses the moment the world changes its mind. True freedom, he says, is to want nothing you cannot control. And so, in the quiet hours when the good man feels forgotten, misunderstood, or betrayed, Seneca's voice cuts through time. You are not losing, you are being refined. Each act of integrity is an act of defiance. Each rejection you endure with dignity is a victory against corruption. Each temptation you resist is a reminder that your soul cannot be bought. The modern good man is not weak, he is rare. And that rarity comes with exile. But there's a hidden strength in exile. It's in the silence where your conscience becomes your teacher, your solitude your sanctuary, and your suffering your purification. The world does not need more good men, in appearance. It needs more men unafraid to pay the price of being one. And that, Seneca would say, is the only kind of man truly alive. Seneca never wrote in slogans, but if he lived today, his wisdom would sound like commandments carved into stone, not to inspire comfort, but to forge discipline. His philosophy wasn't meant to decorate your mind, it was meant to fortify your soul. The hidden cost of being a good man is paid daily, in choices, in restraint, in silence. But those who can endure it, Seneca believed, become unbreakable. The first law, never trade your peace for approval. The moment you shape your actions around how you'll be perceived, you've already abandoned yourself. Seneca wrote that. He who seeks approval from the crowd has already condemned his own judgment. Modern men spend their lives performing, for bosses, for lovers, for algorithms, always chasing the illusion of being seen. But visibility is not validation. The good man does not broadcast his virtue, he lives it. In stillness, without applause. The stronger your conscience grows, the quieter your need for recognition becomes. The second law, suffer well. You cannot be good without suffering. Seneca believed suffering was not punishment but proof that your virtue is real. Fire tests gold, he said, and adversity tests the brave. Every time life denies you, humiliates you, or breaks your plans, it's refining your soul like metal in flame. The man who avoids pain never discovers his depth. The man who embraces it earns his calm. So do not curse the hardship, it's your initiation into clarity. The third law, detach from outcomes, but not from effort. Seneca's greatest insight was that freedom begins when you separate what you can control from what you can't. You control your character, your discipline, your choices, not the result. The modern man who obsesses over outcomes becomes enslaved by anxiety. But the one who simply acts rightly, regardless of the reward, becomes untouchable. Work for virtue, not validation. Because once you no longer fear losing anything external, the world loses its grip on you. The fourth law: be ruthless with your time. Seneca's essay on the shortness of life is a brutal mirror for men who waste their days in triviality. It is not that we have a short time to live, he said, but that we waste much of it. Every distraction is a theft, every pointless argument a robbery. He believed time is the only true currency of existence, and most men spend it as if it's infinite. The good man, the Stoic, guards his attention like a fortress. Because every hour spent on nonsense is an hour stolen from mastery. The fifth law: let restraint be your rebellion. Modern men mistake indulgence for freedom, endless choice, endless stimulation. But Seneca would argue the opposite. True freedom is self-mastery. No man is free who is a slave to his passions. To say no in a world addicted to yes is a revolutionary act. The good man practices control, not because he's weak, but because he's dangerous when disciplined. The more the world tempts him with chaos, the more his stillness becomes an act of defiance. The sixth law: do good, even when it's thankless. There will be days when your integrity feels wasted, when doing the right thing brings only silence or scorn. Seneca would say, do it anyway. Virtue is not a strategy, it's a commitment. It's not meant to make you admired, it's meant to make you whole. The reward of a good deed, he wrote, is to have done it. The man who acts justly, even unseen, has already won the only approval that matters, his own. The seventh law: own your solitude. Every good man must learn to walk alone. Not in bitterness, but in clarity. The crowd is noisy, manipulative, always changing. Solitude is where you recalibrate your soul, where the noise of the world fades, and the voice of reason becomes audible again. Seneca said, associate with those who make you better. And when there are none, solitude itself will. In silence, the mind sharpens. In solitude, you become self-contained, needing no validation, no audience, no echo. The eighth law: live as if your death were watching you. For Seneca, the thought of mortality wasn't morbid, it was liberating. He meditated daily on death, not as fear, but as focus. You act like mortals in all that you fear, he said, and like immortals in all that you desire. Remembering your impermanence is not nihilism, it's urgency. The man who lives with death in mind does not waste his words or compromise his values. He becomes precise, intentional, fearless. He becomes alive. These laws are not romantic ideals. They are battle disciplines for the soul. To be good in a decaying world is not to be soft, it's to be steel wrapped in grace. Every moment you choose honesty over convenience, discipline over desire, restraint over reaction, you sharpen that steel. Seneca's vision of the good man was not someone who preaches virtue, but one who embodies it quietly, unwaveringly, regardless of who's watching. A man who can be insulted without hatred, rejected without bitterness, and unseen without losing his self-worth. Because goodness, in its truest form, is invisible strength. If you live by these laws, you'll lose much: comfort, approval, maybe companionship. But what you'll gain is beyond price: peace, self-respect, and a sense of unbreakable inner dignity. You'll no longer depend on the world's fairness to stay grounded. You'll no longer chase affection to feel valued. You'll simply be. Seneca's world collapsed in blood and betrayal. Yet he died with serenity. That is not weakness, that is power at its highest frequency. To live rightly, even when everything crumbles, is the only kind of immortality a man can earn. And that is what it truly means to pay, and survive, the hidden cost of being a good man. There's a strange silence that follows every act of goodness in a world that no longer values it. No applause, no reward, only the echo of your own conscience. And in that silence, most men break. They wonder if it was worth it, if virtue still matters when corruption rules, when deceit wins, when strength without mercy climbs the highest towers. But Seneca's voice cuts through the centuries with unrelenting calm. The good man does not act for the world's reward. He acts because he cannot do otherwise. That's the final truth. Virtue is not a transaction. It's a condition of the soul. You do not live rightly to be seen. You live rightly to remain whole. Because the price of moral compromise is not external. It's the quiet corrosion of your own being. Every lie told, every cowardice justified, every betrayal ignored, they eat away at you like slow poison. And one day, when the noise fades, you wake up realizing you've gained everything except yourself. Seneca understood this with terrifying clarity. When Nero turned against him, the emperor he had once guided, Seneca could have begged, flattered, or schemed his way out. But instead, he chose to die with peace rather than live with shame. He slid his wrists in a warm bath, his blood mingling with the water, speaking softly to his friends about philosophy as life left him. The Romans called it madness. But in truth, it was freedom. He refused to let tyranny define his end. His death was his final argument, that the good man can be killed, but not conquered. And that's what the modern man must learn again. The world will tempt you to bend, to trade a little integrity for convenience, a little honesty for opportunity, a little peace for popularity. It will whisper that decency is weakness, that corruption is survival, that truth is outdated. And if you listen long enough, you'll start to believe it. But Seneca would tell you, every compromise you make for comfort takes a piece of your power. Every time you betray what you know is right, you shrink, even if the world claps for you. The good man's path is lonely, but it's not empty. Because in that solitude lies a sacred kind of strength, the strength of a man who cannot be bought, who cannot be swayed, who answers only to his conscience. You will not always be understood, but you will always be at peace. You will not always be praised, but you will always be whole. Seneca's lesson is not that virtue makes life easier, it makes it meaningful. It is the fire that burns away illusion, leaving only what is real. To live rightly in an age of deception is to become both target and torch. The world will test you, not to destroy you, but to see if your goodness was real or decoration. And when that test comes, remember his words. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. So let them call you naive. Let them call you outdated. Let them laugh when you refuse to bend. Because in the end, it is not the clever men who endure, it's the clear ones. Not the loud, but the anchored. Not the rich, but the incorruptible. When your time comes, and the noise of life fades into quiet, you will not regret being a good man. You will regret every time you were not. The world will forget the applause it once gave others, but the peace you built within will remain untouched. That is the hidden cost of being a good man, and the hidden crown. You pay for it with isolation, patience, and loss. But what you earn is something no empire can give you, the right to meet death without fear, and to meet life without guilt. That is Seneca's gift. And his challenge. To live in a world that rewards deceit, and still choose to be good.